This is Leadership in Action, and I'm Mark Stiles, your host. Join me as we delve deep into the passions, expertise, and experiences of Boston area innovators. Sponsored by the Boston chapter of Entrepreneurs Organization, this is Leadership in Action. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Leadership in Action. I am here today with an entrepreneur, a visionary. He's been working in the landscape and snow and ice management field for over 20 years. He's a leader who enjoys building relationships and opportunities with his employees, clients, peers, and vendors. He's also a longtime member of EO Boston and a past president. Founder, chief visionary of JC Grounds Management and Rockstar Award recipient from EO Boston, Jonathan Crandall. What's up, John? How are you?
After that, introduction, I feel amazing. So, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Let's get right into it. The question number one, what is a common misconception about leadership, running a business, and or being an entrepreneur?
Oh, common misconception. Got a funny story about this. A close friend of mine, I've been an entrepreneur for a while, and he was jumping into a new business. And he shares this story better, but he basically said that the day he got his town business license, he went out and bought a set of golf gloves, and little did he, I guess, know at the time that it wasn't about, you don't start a business and go golfing. It takes some time to get some recreation time into the schedule, I guess.
So what's the answer to that through that story?
The answer to that is people think that, or the misconception, I guess, is that you're your own boss. And the reality is that you actually just obtain more and more bosses. Your customers are your boss. Sometimes your employees are, they're in control of you in some aspects, especially early on. So you don't necessarily go into starting your own business and just all of a sudden have a wide open schedule,
Interesting. So that American dream, buy the new home, start your own business, go in there and boom, you're in this social class. You're in this other place where you're actually not.
Yeah, I think, I do believe in that dream. I think like the opportunities in the US are just like amazing. And so many people that, come into this country comparatively to where they came from, at least from what I hear, there's so many awesome opportunities here, but it's not instant, it's not without effort, without a lot of work, to be able to really, and intention, I think, is an important word to really have a good grasp on time management. When you go in, at least when I started bootstrapped, it was like whatever would give me $1 to help pay for everything, payroll, growth, and everything else, my own bills. Like I would just do whatever I had to do to make ends meet. And I think a lot of people have this assumption going into it early on anyways, that, it's going to be, actually Michael Gerber writes in the E-Myth, the entrepreneurial myth, that they're going to come in and just all of a sudden they're going to have, this great freedom of their schedule and the money's going to, just come easily. And that's not the case, at least in my experience.
You mentioned Michael Gerber and the E-Myth. That was one of the very first business books that I consumed, and it was actually very moving for me. But let's talk about your friend. He goes in, I'm assuming he gets his DBA, right? So he's a sole practitioner. He's running a business. I have this certificate. I am somebody. I'm going to go celebrate because I'm going to have all this freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think he just realized, really quick that he had to get to work. You're going in, you look around, you look left and right, and you realize, hey, wait, it's just me. So I've got to get to work, actually start producing. If it's a service business, you've got to start producing the service, and probably start producing it on your own if you're really bootstrapped. Otherwise, you hire a few employees to help with that, or subcontractors, and even in that, there's so much time just to manage those people and manage them efficiently.
It's really interesting conversation because I have some shared experiences of how I, started my business. But, you think about it and, so many people are saying, I'm not going to work for somebody, I'm going to go do it on my own. And they think they're skipping this imaginary line, like they're jumping to the front of the line, but they're really buying a job, right? They're investing into another job to get started. And you mentioned so eloquently, right? It's not one boss. It's like every other person is your boss.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's, you definitely need that. You need to have that self-motivation. You need to be able to persevere, be persistent, and be self-motivated, because otherwise it's not like there's somebody there that's going to be telling you to do something, right? So you need to get out there and do it, get it done. But yeah, I think that's a huge part is the realization that, hey, we've got to make payroll, we've got to find the jobs, we got to perform the jobs. A lot of people, to your point, you're creating a job for yourself if you don't really grow up beyond that. And there's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I've said to people in the past, like, I actually think, again, this is my opinion and experience, but I think that, if you go into business and whether you have another full-time job and you're doing a business on the side where you're literally performing most of the functions, you can be very profitable in that. Or you get into the business and you really create a business, where you have, over a period of time, you start filling functions, have leadership team members, have managers, et cetera, and you're actually building what I consider a real business. Being hung up somewhere in the middle, I've just found people get, again, my experience, people get in trouble there, where they're almost too small, but they're having a challenge to pay for that team. At least from my opinion, you've got to kind of grow out of that phase and grow into a larger company where that team starts to really, your upper management doesn't expand too much in proportion with revenue. So you can really start reaping some benefits. But that's at least what I've shared with people is, go big or stay small, but stuck in the middle is tough, in my opinion.
That's really, really interesting. And it's it's a choice, right? But sometimes in that middle, it's not a choice, right? In the beginning, it's a choice. It's a business. I'm proud of it. I've got the name on the door. I'm somebody. And then you're building something great and people are really enjoying it. And then all of a sudden you start to feel that wheel. And it's like, which way do we go here? Do we contract down and work more? Or do we figure out some sort of strategy around growth and getting a little bit bigger and more efficient? And Gerber talks about that a lot with the three personality types, right? Minder, grinder, finder, right? That was instilled in my head because as I sat there in the beginning, I was all three.
Yep. Yeah.
You look around and there's no one else to share that with.
Right. Yeah. So, a lot of the books that I know a lot of EOers have read, Greg Crabtree has one, Simple Numbers. And then there's, I think it's Les McCowan, who has Predictable Success. But a lot of those guys, they talk about a similar concept of, that kind of, I don't know if they call it purgatory or whatever, but that period where you're going from a small business to a bigger business and how challenging it is. And a lot of people will retreat because they'll start trying to push things along to grow into a bigger business. And they get pushed down so many times. They're like, geez, it really is true, because people say, I heard the cliche of like, what do you, why would you get any bigger? You're just causing yourself more headaches. And that, that's not real in my opinion. If you don't, create systems, processes, hire good people, have good core values, all those kind of things, that can become true. And I think it's more true when you're micromanaging everything, and you probably are if you don't have those processes in place. But as the business grows and matures and you get some really talented people and you start really refining your process, it can actually get easier. I still believe 0 to 1 million was probably the hardest time in my life, my business life and personal life. And and even 0 to 3, 0 to 5 was pretty challenging. But as we became more mature, we had more people to delegate tasks off to, and people to take ownership to their functions. Things, at least in my opinion, became different for sure, but a little easier because we had more people to delegate to.
Well, tell us about your company. What is the service you provide?
Our primary service is snow removal. So we do a lot of snow removal, de-icing and whatnot for all commercial clients throughout Massachusetts, a little into southern New Hampshire, and we do some landscape management, and then there's some other subsidiaries just because of the operating business. So there's some real estate involved. There's some leasing involved because of all the equipment we own. But the main core business that creates the majority of the revenue and profitability is a snow and ice business that we run, and that's run now through time and through design. I really want to build the business bigger and have branch locations, and learn to do that through a few things. But one of the things was the Entrepreneurs Masters program through EO that kind of opened my eyes that it was a possibility. But that's who we are today, and we're continuing to scale that branch model.
So that's EMP. Is that what you're referring to?
EMP, yeah.
So
It's had several names over the years: Birthing the Giants, Gathering the Titans, and now it's EMP. But it's by far, out of all, I've done a lot with EO over the years, traveled all over the world with EO, and done many of their executive programs. And EMP is still my favorite program I've ever done. It was the most impactful for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what did it do for your business? So when you walked in that room, your business was where? You walked out of that room, where did you go?
Yeah, I think there was an immediate result in revenue off the bat, but I can't remember where we were. We're probably around 3 million, 2 to 3 million of revenue at the time. But here's what's funny is the first year was just amazing because there were people from all over the world that were in that room, and just being exposed to people that had anywhere from $1 million in revenue business to like hundreds of millions from all over the world, and hearing the different stories was really cool. And then hearing from all the different, they brought in a lot of founders, a lot of people that had produced some major companies. Like I remember the CEO of iRobot, who was local to Boston, came in. We had several others, and just hearing their stories of, they had started their companies from almost nothing and grew them into successful enterprises. And there were some people in the room that were in, the same boat as some of those folks that were speaking. But that was cool. Year 2 was more about scaling. And I actually had, I think, the second anxiety attack of my entire life. And it was because I wasn't sure if my business was a business that could scale. In year 3, I ended up, obviously working 3 was just kind of a finalization, like a wrap up of all the tools and stories and everything else. And I had started to really put a plan together after year 3, and we've been evolving that plan ever since. So it's been
tell me about that conversation you were having with yourself in year 2. Right? Like it's never been done. Who am I? Like, how can I scale this? Like, what was that conversation like?
So the snow side of the business is it's emergency service
and seasonal.
It's seasonal. And I just wasn't sure that the amount of, our clientele is high touch too. Like we deal with a lot of hospitals, a lot of large logistics centers, and to the degree of how specific we are of our results at the end of a snowstorm, we want to make sure that the client is 100% happy, that they're going to be able to go through this site safely and be able to produce their business, or be able to produce results in their business due to us being a successful player in their lot. So like if you think of like a large retail establishment, we take care of a lot of those as well. The amount of people that go in and out of those every day, it's tens of millions or more in revenue that can come off of one site if they're shut down for the day. So it's a huge risk there. The other side is we take care of a lot of hospitals that have, emergency rooms. And if one of those ambulances can't make it up the hill to the ER, somebody could die. So there's massive, massive risk and if we don't produce at a real high level. So my concern was, how can I get people, one, to take it as seriously, and two, to have the systems processes so it didn't need to be micromanaged. And I just wasn't sure if that was if that was if that was a real thing that it could be done. And what I did is I started to pursue masters of my industry across the country. And I started visiting them, just literally picking the phone up, calling them, seeing if they would see me and if I could come into their business. And very, very fortunate to have made a lot of friends doing that over the years.
Well, as they say, right, all boats rise with the tide, right? That probably made them feel really good to help, you as a fellow business owner, and also to be seen as a leader in their industry, right? People innately, I feel, want to mentor if they have the right situation to do it. So you've been with EO for 16 years, 15 years? How long have you been with EO?
Yeah, I don't even have, it's right in that range. I don't even know the exact day it started. But it's been at least 15 plus years, because when I was in my mid to early 20s, early 20s, I was fortunate to be in Accelerator, when it first started, the first year it was started. And prior to that, I had a close friend in my hometown who was in EO that would take me as a guest even before I was an Accelerator to a lot of events. So I was real lucky.
That is lucky, because it's the stroke of luck, I guess, to find luck, but it's the stroke of luck that someone introduced you to it, right? I mean, someone gave you the book, or you chose to buy the book, The E-Myth, got your mind circling, and then to be part of this community where people are like-minded, right? So, of course, why can't you scale that, John? What do you mean you can't scale it? Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at these leases. Let's look at this, that, and the other thing. Let's look at the contributors. Who's going to participate? What's your NOI? Let's look at this, right? And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, maybe I can do this.
Right. Yeah. And it's it's been an awesome journey since, and now we look at it as, we were able to figure out, Dan Sullivan talks about this too in Strategic Coach, but he'll say, do your best at, what's your unique ability, all that, and one of the tools that I love that he has is probably the simplest tool. And it seems like such common sense, but it took, it took signing up to Dan Sullivan to Strategic Coach to learn it. It was he calls it the largest check. And basically what he says is, and I'll simplify this, it won't be as clean, but he says, look at, what's the largest check you have today? Meaning, like, what customer pays you the most for the whole season or whatever. Which customers do you like to work with, and which profit centers are generating the highest amount of profitability? And we looked at that. And then he says, after you figure that out, what's your dream check, right? So what do you think, whether it's 5 years, 10 years out, what would the next largest check look like? What's it look like next year? And then what's your lowest check? So it's kind of that 20-80 rule, like, so we do that exercise every year still, and we're still surprised. We usually look at the largest 5, and we're still surprised sometimes at who they end up being. And we'll ask the operational team, who do they love to work with? What do we know we're really good at? And what's that look like 5 years out? And that's been pretty eye-opening. And it's kind of neat to look back at those notes and see where you came from.
Oh, it's always great. And journaling those things and that journey is so important. So you're looking at doubling down on that top 20, and then looking at that bottom 20 and saying, are we spending too much money with these people? Do we want to cut them loose? Is that kind of the conversation there?
Absolutely. Because you're not doing yourself or them service. If they're your lower 20, you're probably not giving them what they need. And they're not really giving you what you need. So yeah, we'll cut them loose, and they'll find a better, fit for them. And then we're looking at the top 20, and we're applying that to our demographic from a marketing standpoint. Who are we targeting in the future? We want to target more of those types of people or those types of businesses. So that's what we've really tried to kind of use to steer our path, for the future.
And it's working.
It's been hugely helpful because it definitely helps us pinpoint where we're looking to go, and it gives a lot of clarity to the whole team.
Prior to EO and EMT, did you visualize yourself sitting at this desk with the spreadsheets that are being presented to you and the OKRs and the breakdowns of where you're at?
So it's funny, when I was growing up, I thought I was going to become a home builder, and my mother, a couple things that, key things that I learned over the years. My mother said to me, I was in the third grade, I still remember, she was a public school teacher. And she said, John, I asked her, I said, why do you do what you do? And I don't remember why this conversation came up, because she never made a lot of money. And she said, it's not for the money. I absolutely love what I do. I love working with kids. I love teaching. And she told me, I'll never forget, she said, you're going to be working, she called it working. It's what, I don't always call it that, because I really do love it. But she said, you're going to be working 70% of your life. Make sure you love what you do. Right.
Great advice.
So that was number one. So I kind of, over the years, reflecting on it, I wondered, is it like really what I love to do? Do I love snow plowing? Do I love landscaping? Well, I do. I really enjoy it. I'm very passionate of the industry. But I found myself going, I wonder if I would have loved home building more. And what I figured out was, one day, probably about, I don't know, somewhere over 8, 9, 10 years ago, I didn't love going to work anymore. And I realized it wasn't what I was doing here. It was the people I was with. And when we made the change to the culture, to the, really adopted the core values and started hiring towards them, I made sure that everyone that's here, almost everybody, is somebody I really, really, truly enjoy working with. And we live by that, because it doesn't matter what you do. If you don't like the people you're with, it's not going to be a good thing. And then the other thing I'll just share really quick is, I found out, and this shows up in a lot of my personality testings, like I'll do DISC and Colby and all these other things.
Yeah.
And there's different ways of saying it, but I like to build things. I always have. It doesn't matter if it's like put together a desk that came from IKEA, or if it's building a whole building for our business, which we've done. And my brother said to me one day when I was younger, he goes, John, you'll always own a business, because you love to build things and you can never stop building a business.
So that's what you love. That's right. What you love. I love that. So how did you find your way into the snow and landscaping if you thought maybe you were a contractor? Did you have a job that you really liked and it all of a sudden turned into the business to build?
Yeah, some people, it's too long of a story to share here, but I'll give you the brief, the cliff notes.
The bullets. Yeah. Give me the bullets. I like bullets. I'm a high DI, by the way, for the disc folks. So give me the bullets. Yeah, a good amount of people know my background, but it was out of necessity. My brother and I were on our own at 16. Our mother passed. Wow.
And I had started the business, and he had started day trading with the little bit of money we got 1 year of our pension. Long story short, I paid the utilities of the house. He paid the mortgage. I was 16. He was 19. And we both had a political science. We both promised our mother we'd finish college. We graduated political science, criminal justice degrees. He went on to be a higher up over at State Street Research in Boston. Wow. Still trading today. Incredibly successful. Married another beautiful woman in finance, and I went on to continue to do this. I just decided it was something I enjoyed. I liked kind of creating my own destiny, so to speak, basically owning the failures and the successes. I really like that. And yeah, so we worked out. Things worked out. I'm sure your mother would be super, super proud. I mean, that's amazing. It's really, really, truly amazing. 16 and 19. Yep. What did that look like? I mean, it definitely could have been a train wreck, but we yeah. But we pulled it out. It wasn't perfect. I always say wasn't a perfect path, but but I think we learned a whole lot by being kind of kicked out of the nest, so to speak. And we look back at it now and go, it's terrible that our mother isn't here, but it was a great part of our I think kind of drive to success. So
The journey, right? The journey is not always going to be a golden brick road, right? It is a journey. And I think that's the whole key to it, right? As a business builder, right? There is no true destination, right?
agreed.
It's how we're learning and we're growing. So speaking of learning and growing, what would you tell yourself at 16 so that maybe you could avoid a business mistake or a journey mistake that you may have benefited by knowing then?
I don't have any regrets, because I do think like everything you do along the way is what creates the story. It's what creates who you are. The one thing that probably, looking back, and it's kind of silly, it's less about business, is I've had a couple bouts with skin cancer, minor, but I've got a very pale complexion, and I worked out in the field, and I didn't take care of that side of myself, so that's something that I do like, oh geez, I should have been smarter about that. And then also like just being aware of that. A friend of mine said to me once, he goes, you're giving your health and your body, and you take care of your car. People get a car and they'll take care of it like crazy, and they have it for 5 years, and then they get a new car. You only get one of these. And I asked a mentor of mine. He's in his 60s, and I think he's a genius. He's one of my he's a close friend, and he's just super smart. I've got a few of those, fortunately.
Yeah.
But this guy, I asked once, I'm like, you're in pretty good shape. Like, what do you do? Because he was in his 60s. At the time, he was in better shape than me. And he goes, John, I got to live here.
Right.
I'm like, what? What are you talking? He's like, well, I got to live here. My mind lives here. And it's amazing. You see some people that are 40 years old that look like they could be 60, and you see some people that are 40 that look like they're 30. And it's just, how do we really, none of it matters, right? It's all, my other buddy will say it all goes back into the box. At the end of the day, like the money, the successes, everything, none of it matters at the end, but it's how long can you enjoy it now? Like, I don't care what spiritually, if you're religious or not. I believe there is a higher power. I believe that someday, hopefully, I choose to believe what's makes me feel better, that something will happen in the future. But right now, I consider this heaven. Like this is an amazing. I'm having an amazing time, and the only thing that's going to stop that is my health. So that's the one thing, is I'd say, we go back and just be aware of, take care of yourself while you're building your business or whatever else.
And wear sunscreen.
Wear sunscreen.
Wear sunscreen, kids. It's so important. I mean, the research is there. It's so easy. And you and I, buddy, I mean, we don't tan. It's a varying shade of red. I can see it through the camera here, and we have that same complexion. And, how many times did we pick that scab off our nose? But it's also like, get to the doctor and get scanned, right? Because that early detection is the key to success there, right?
Yeah. And you can keep it, if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, you can still reverse and add more time to your life, if you take care of yourself. We started executive physicals here in the company about 2 or 3 years ago. I did mine, had my wife go, and then I decided it was so impactful that I sent our leadership team, and we're hoping to expand that as things allow it. But the leadership team and their spouses all went. We had a couple of people that did, find some things that they may not have known. So take care of yourself.
That's really great. It was such a generous contribution to your contributors, right? To be able to do that early test. Because I mean, let's call it what it is, our United States healthcare system, I don't care what year you're listening to this, is probably not the best healthcare system out there. I don't know what one is, but those scans, that early detection, I mean, I can't say enough about it. I think it's great that you're doing that with your team. So how about your kiddos? What are you telling the twin daughters and son as they grow up? What are they going to, are they going to go work for a company, or how are you going to have those conversations with them?
Yeah, I think, I always look for guidance as well, and talk to people that I believe have been successful. And the parents I think that I see as the most successful, the ones where the kids, one, contributing to society in one way, shape, or form, are happy. Hopefully they find a meaningful life, spouse, all that kind of thing. But then here's the true, what I think is success: when you have an adult child that wants to hang out with you.
Mm.
And that may sound funny, but that's what I'd like, is my kids to, want to spend time with my wife and I, as they get older. They're married, have their own kids and everything else. And the one thing that I'm trying to coach them the most on is the ability to communicate. I think no matter what you do, whether you go work for someone else, you build your own business, you stay home with the kids, whatever it is, I think communication is one of the most important attributes to like success and just in general. So I'm trying to really teach them and expose them to how to best, um, communicate, how to know how they're showing up, how to others, and how others show up to them, and understanding the different perspectives.
It's a lofty goal. I think you would be in rare air to have all of your kids like, Dad, let's go. Let's meet in Kansas City for a ball game, or let's go to, let's hang out as adults. Come hang out with my kids, because it is so challenging, right, to raise kids, and there's no real good manual about it, and how much is pushing dad versus friend. There's so many conversations with the growing children, and there's so many opinions. As your kids, I'm looking here, are 7 and 2. You're going to hear a lot of opinions, and you know what you said. Well, you know what they say about opinions, right? We all have them, and we all have something else too. But tell me about this really cool goal and endeavor that you're creating up in New Hampshire in all of the 4,000 footers. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I had a guy, Bill Fastori, actually. He was an EO member. Not sure if Bill still is, but he was an EO member for years. Great guy. And I asked Bill once, we were actually in Ireland on a chapter retreat, and I learned Bill had exited, sold his business. And I had asked Bill, I said, who are the most impactful people in your business over the years, or what was the most impactful piece of your business over all the years? And he said, Bonnie and Steve. And long story short, I hired Bonnie and Steve like 6 months later, through Bill's introduction. And Bonnie was a life coach for Bill, also exposed him to a lot of like the core values and different systems for his business in that sense. And Bonnie came in for me. She was a business coach for years. Bonnie Gorby, amazing lady. She's since retired. But she exposed me to the circle. She called it the circle of life. It's an exercise. So you see where your balance is and everything else. Anyways, she came back to me, and in a professional way, she's like, John, you're pretty messed up.
I love it.
You're like 95% business, like 4%,
Wow.
family, and 1% life. You're personal. At the time, I didn't have the kids, so I'm like, I got to get this cleaned up and straightened out. So I started doing more things intentionally with my fiance at the time. And then I also want to carve out the personal time, because she said it was real important to recharge. And she said I was basically, she like flipped my thought, because I would feel guilty if I left before other people in the business and everything else.
Right.
She's like, John, you got to understand, if you don't recharge, you're not showing up to your team as well as you could. You're doing a disservice. You need to. So she was like flipping my thought process. And I started to understand, well, one, I need to get healthy. So when I got out of the field, I gained a ton of weight. So I had to get control of the weight. And then I wanted to do something that I enjoyed to maintain that. So I dropped about 70 pounds of weight.
Wow.
And, had that off for about 13 years. And what I've done is, obviously through diet and exercise, but I incorporated hiking into my life. And then, as any entrepreneur, you kind of obsess about things, get a little crazy. And I found out that there's these lists, 48 4,000 foot peaks in New Hampshire. There's a winter 48 list. There's terrifying 25, the 52 at the View. There's all these different lists. So I just started cranking them out, and now we're at like 200 plus summits, myself and the dog. And I've had a ton of business coaches over the years that just go hike. They actually reach out to me because they know it's a passion, and we end up going hiking. So I have friends and coaches and, even clients that will come hiking, which is awesome.
A walk and talk.
Yeah.
Right.
Walk and talk, drive and talk to get there, walk and talk out there. And if no one goes, it's me and the dog and some great peace,
It is. And it's so serene too. So when you have that other ear, right, whether it's a business partner, a business coach, mentor, mentee, you have that focus, right? Everybody's got that dialed in focus. No one's putting the earbuds on because it's the sounds of nature. And,
Right.
and it's the conversation, and it's the, how you doing? You sound like you're breathing kind of heavy, should we slow down? Right.
Right.
I love it. Wow. That's amazing. So you're still passionate about that.
I'm going for actually so Thursday night, Chris Kaplan, who's another EO guy and works with Eric. I know you mentioned you work with Eric a little. Chris Kaplan and I are hiking Friday. We're gonna go hike it's a huge, big, audacious goal, but I'm involved in potentially purchasing a mountain in New Hampshire right now. So
really,
hike the mountain, and then there's a quick hike, and then the next day we're gonna do a bigger hike. We'll have dinner, just be a great time, so so and usually Chris and I will have some pretty good conversations about long term, what's the next 5 years look like, what's the next 10 for both of us. You get to kind of poke some holes in each other's thoughts and ideas, and egg each other on. It's good stuff.
How do you buy a mountain?
I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to talk too much about
it. That is so cool. So of course, as the entrepreneur, my mind is racing. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I could buy a mountain and I could put container housings on them and do self-sustained housing, this could be like a hiker's paradise. So I digress. But wow, this was great, man. I appreciate you joining. Most important question, if someone wants to reach out, do business with you, connect with you, mentor, mentee, what have you, how do they find you?
Well, if you made it to the end of this podcast, it means you have some interest. And oh man, reach out, like john@jcgrounds.com, or you can look us up and call the office. People can always get a hold of me. But I was sharing earlier that when you and I were talking offline on this, I've done, magazine articles in my industry. I've done, I've so many different things where you have different podcasts and whatnot. And it's so rare that you get somebody that does reach out. I'll get a couple here and there, but that's where most of my ideas came from, is reaching out to different entrepreneurs, and whether they're in the same industry or not. So never be shy to do that. So I'm more than happy to talk.
So can I reach out to you on LinkedIn, message you and say, let's go for a hike, dude, let's get on the calendar?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done that. I've certainly, struck up conversation and gone hiking with people I don't even know. So it's good stuff.
I love it. So I'm going to message you and we're going to get up one of those very soon.
Cool.
John, thank you so much for sharing with us. I learned a tremendous amount. You really got to that 5% and got vulnerable with us, which is super appreciated. Thank you for your time, man.
Oh, thank you. Love doing this, and enjoyed the conversation.
Well, listener, thank you. Thank you for joining today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you learned something like I did, or if you laughed, tell someone about it. Tell anybody about it. Tell everybody about it. Share it with them. And if you're looking to connect with John, look in the show notes. Simply open up where you're consuming this, and Liam and the folks at Ringmaster will have all of his links in there for you. Punch right through, and I guess we'll see you at the summit.
Awesome.
Thank you again, Sean.
Thank you.
Folks, this has been another exciting episode of Leadership in Action. We will see you next time. Leadership in Action is sponsored by the Boston chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization. As the world's only peer-to-peer network exclusively for entrepreneurs, EO helps transform the lives of those who transform the world.